Record tonight. It says it is. Good evening. This is Mels 603 for add-on licensure, folks. We are now in week 5. Happy Valentine's Day. Hope everybody's doing well. Let's catch up to where we are this week. Students' rights, review local student handbooks, discussion board, observe student due process and school and report. Some of you have already done your discussion boards. I want to remind those of you who haven't to focus on the process in terms of what rights are observed for the students. To that end, tonight I'm going to go through some documents that I had under tonight and show you the student rights section. So due process is more than just disciplinary incidents. There are some other things. And I also wanted to address, I don't know if Rory's with us tonight or not yet, point that I was making with him earlier this week. Yeah, Rory's with us. There is a common misconception that if you're dealing with an exceptional children's student, that you don't have to do the manifestation, termination, functional behavior assessment, and all of that battery until you get to 10-day OSS, or until either they participate in an incident that requires a 10-day OSS and a due process hearing, or when they accumulate enough suspensions to get them to 10 days. That is somewhat correct, but it's not exactly correct. Two things to be remembered. Number one, in-school suspension counts for EC kids toward their 10 days. And number two, if a student shows a pattern, and a pattern means 3, if a student shows a pattern of their behavior, an exceptional child, that moves them to the front of the line. They don't have to have a 10-day out of school. You have to do a functional behavior assessment, a reeval. You have to do, the psychologist has to come in and do the reeval, and you have to do manifestation termination. So what schools will do to play the game until they get caught is a kid comes in, and rather than giving them 5 days for what they did, or 10, they'll give them 1. And the kid will continue to do the same thing multiple times. And that way, oh, we got 10 days to play with here before we have to go through all that paperwork and all that drama. No, as soon as they do the similar incident the 3rd time, that kicks in that due process where that kid goes through a manifestation and termination, determine if those behaviors are part of their disability. You get caught on both ends on that one. You get caught on the kid keeps on getting in the same trouble and building up, and you didn't do anything to try to get him any help to get a behavior plan or modifications in his behavior plan. That end, the law gets after you. But on the other end, that kid ends up hurting somebody, and it's determined that 7 times this year he's punched somebody. Ooh, that's not good. So under normal circumstances, if a kid creates an event or an incident that requires a 10-day suspension, yeah, you go through with it. But if they're creating less than 10-day incidents, but it's a pattern, and you're only giving them like 1 day, on the 3rd time, it does invoke their due process rights to go through that process. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but I'm telling you, you do not want to go to court when a kid has done the same thing 7 or 8 times, and he ends up getting hurt or somebody else gets hurt. And it's determined that that process, his due process rights should have kicked in, 4 or 5 incidents ago. That's not a good thing when you go to court. I can tell you, because I was always the one that had to go to court on these kinds of things for the district. That's not the kind of thing that you want to happen. So we'll look at some more due process things. I don't have on the schedule this week to cover evidence artifacts again. I can if I need to, but you know that you're working on task 3 of the OMA this week. You know that you're supposed to be assessing the process for your master schedule. If you need help on that, let me know, but I won't waste your time tonight. So I'm going to dive right in on some of these due process things that you might not be aware of. And so let me move to those quickly. All right, new share. I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to minimize that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to start out with is incident reporting. There is an appendix. I hope you can see this on your screen. This one is kind of ancillary. I don't know if that's the right term. It's not exactly an outlier. It occurs more than that. But a lot of times you have students who get involved with the juvenile court system. That's a whole nother level of rights and due process that they have. As a former high school principal, I had to deal with this a lot, more than I would like to admit. This wasn't something that happened once a year. This happened more like once a week in a large 3,000 student high school in an urban area. This happened about once a week for me, sometimes more than once a week, that we would have somebody, one of our students who was involved in the juvenile court system. There's a whole nother set of laws. It's in that reporting manual that's on this week's tab under week 5 Zoom. Appendix C, the Family Education Rights Privacy Act, FERPA, established a general rule that personally identifiable information must be kept confidential. Recognizing that a juvenile on probation attending school needs the full support of school to meet the conditions. The law says General Assembly enacted to provide a narrow exception to the rule. That court records must be maintained in strictest confidence. So that means that the juvenile court counselor, or what we commonly refer to as the JCC, has to tell the principal, orally and in writing, if any of the following conditions exist: felony petition, court fans jurisdiction, dismisses a felony, the court order the juvenile to attend school, court modifies or vacate any order. It must be done in person or by telephone before the beginning of the next school day. Delivery must be made as soon as practical, but within 5 days of the action. I would always get a call from the JCC. Now, the Board of Education's guidelines, the principal receives notification from the JCC. Now, here's the part that you've got to be really careful with. The principal may disclose the notification to appropriate staff members in a conference. Can't email them, can't call them. You have to call them in a conference. And then after, they have to, in writing, state that they have read the notification and will maintain its confidentiality. This is part of due process and part of FERPA. You folks in elementary school are sitting there shaking your head and say, boy, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. You may have to. You never know. You may not be. I know we've got some students down in Somerville in the high school down there. They've got 3,000 kids, and we got folks from Charlotte that are in large urban high schools. This is a regular occurrence. Generally, what happens is the principal will delegate to one of the APs the responsibility to keep up with this information. Usually the one that's in charge of discipline, if there's not multiples at a high school and even in a middle school. So you need to read this and know when you have a kid who's been involved in the juvenile court system, what rights that kid has. You can't be talking about it out in public. You can't disclose that information. You can only do it in the conference. You should only do it to the people most affected. A lot of times, if it wasn't something real serious, I didn't even tell people. I could not justify telling them because I didn't have any, they had really no standing in the case. They have to have a specific need a need to know, and that's number 3. And you have to consider the following factors when making the decision to disclose this information to your staff members. And there's the conditions under which that you would do that. You shall not provide a copy or written document received from the court to anybody. You can't give them a piece of paper or put it in an email. You can only tell them and make them sign a pledge that they won't disclose it. You can only tell them in a conference. To protect the safety or improve the education for the juvenile student. So here is this due process for those folks at your school. You cannot call them in. You cannot call them in and punish them again or talk to them about this. You can't talk to the staff. You have to maintain confidentiality, and that's part of their due process protections under the law. And it comes, you can see the statutes here, but it comes under the umbrella of FERPA. So if you get juveniles in your school that are involved with the court system, there's another level of due process for them. Okay? And again, this is in the reporting manual, and it's in the corresponding manual in South Carolina. All right, so that's the first one. Move this out of the way. So let me. All right. What I have on the screen here is a reporting manual that I had built for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to train administrators. And the purpose of this is to remind you that somewhere in your district there's somebody, someone, or something to train you how on the system. I can show you this one because this system has been deactivated. These manuals are confidential. I couldn't have shown you this a few years back when we still used NCYs. We've now gone to Power School. Both states are using Power School. But Power School looks just like this, but it's no longer under a protective order because we don't use NCYs anymore. But the idea here is part of due process is that you have to give the student notice of their suspension. And we're going to cover that one again in a minute. One of the things that you cannot do is make handwritten notices. The only official one that will stand up in court is the one that is generated from Power School. Power School generates a notice of suspension. It prints it out once you've entered the incident in all three screens correctly. There's a front screen, a middle screen, and a back screen in Power School, discipline incident reporting. It's kind of complicated. You have to be trained. It's not menu driven. You have to know where you're going and what you're doing. There's 3 separate screens that you have to populate information on. Once you've done that, put the appropriate suspension in and the proper date, it will generate the official suspension letter. That is part of due process. We'll get to that tomorrow. We'll just go ahead and send him home today, or whatever. We'll send a handwritten note. We'll call his parents and tell them, or they'll come and pick him up, and we'll tell them they have to have the official notification in hand when that child leaves, or it must be sent home with an older child. That's part of due process. If you miss that step, doesn't matter what the kid did, it'll be thrown out later on appeal. I'll tell you that right now. If you don't learn the system and how to generate official suspension letters, and again, it is not, here's the front screen, here's the middle screen, and then there's the back screen that's going to come up in just a minute. This tells you how to do it, and then you have a back screen. If you don't learn how to use that process and generate those letters, your suspension is null and void. When it's appealed, it will be thrown out on appeal, because you didn't do the official step of due process and giving them the official. Doesn't matter that you told them. Doesn't matter that you wrote it down or typed it up, or you had a carbon. I know we don't use carbons anymore. That you had one printed up, from your school. Does not matter. It has to be this one. That sounds like, well, Dale's making a mind. I can't tell you the number of times when I supervised principals and assistant principals. Of course, we had 180 schools, but I can't tell you the number of times that they forgot this step. They didn't do this. Well, we were in a hurry. We were just trying to get the kid off campus. I don't care. That's not the law. Now I have, as the person who makes this decision, I have no choice but to vacate this suspension. You've left me no choice. We'll lose this one in court. This happened all too frequently. That folks got in a hurry, didn't know, didn't remember, or they stacked the referrals up on the desk. I'll get to them, I'll enter them in tomorrow, or I'll catch up on them this weekend. Oh, no, not for a suspension. Do it, you need to learn the system and be fast enough that you can do it immediately before the kid leaves your office. I've got 2 questions here I need to answer. Let's see. What if he goes home the same day but is allowed to come back? And that doesn't matter. Does not matter. If that child has been suspended, they have to have this. Due process says they have to have the official notification. Yeah, a lot of times you do that. They're going to go, you call the parents, you're going to go home today, I'm just suspending him for the day and come back tomorrow. Doesn't matter. For that suspension to be official and legitimate, you have to send that notice home with that child. What is the policy for incidents that occurred last few minutes? Doesn't matter. Is it okay to hand out no, not okay to hand out the letters the next day. If you got time to suspend him, you got time to put it in and generate the letter. We use a third-party system that generates the written notification. If it's not there in the Power School right away, does it still not stand? No, it will not. There's actually a section in this disciplinary data reporting manual from state departments that say if you use a third-party reporting system that does not absolve you from responsibility to put it in Power School. Let me say that again. This is addressed specifically in the manual that I've shown you. If you use a third-party data collection system like what's the one that everybody uses? Swiss. If you use something like Swiss or this one or whatever, if you use even if your district has adopted it as a third party disciplinary data, that does not absolve you from the responsibility to put it into Power School. Legally, it does not meet the legal standard for due process. Sorry, it's just the way it works. I've had that one 1,000 times in elementary school, but we put it in Swiss and it generated a letter. Well, good for you. That $4 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it doesn't meet the letter of the law. It is not due process unless it's the letter coming out of Power School. You don't want to be the one that lets a kid come back that created some heinous act on your campus, but he gets to come back because his suspension has been vacated by the deputy superintendent, an idiot like me, because you didn't follow the law, and we don't want to have to go to court and lose. They might, people on your faculty might be mad at me, but I'm at the central office. I don't really care. Central office people have zero conscience anyway. That's part. We have it surgically removed when we go. We've operated in the central office under the famous administrative axiom: me first, then you, and every day. We're Teflon people. Nothing sticks to us. So you're the person out at the point of contact with those teachers or those parents of those kids that have to let that kid come back. You won't make that mistake but once. I'll guarantee you that. You won't do it but one time. If you do it a second time, somebody like me will prevent it from happening a third time. But people will be so angry at you, especially teachers, will be so angry at you the first time you make this what you think is just a simple paperwork mistake, but it violates the kid's due process rights. You won't make it again because faculty will want to string you up. Nothing short of taking you out back and shooting you will make them happy. I can tell you that. It won't go well for you. Don't make this mistake. It seems simple. It's one of those things you get caught up in the moment. It's quick. I don't have time. The buses are trying to leave. Just as sure as you don't do it, that'll be the parent that appeals, and on appeal, we go back and document all the paperwork. Was the due process followed? There's two standards, as I told you last week: substantive and procedure. The substance is we have a process in place. The procedural is, did you follow it? No, you didn't send them the notice home. That's don't pass go. Don't collect $200. That's a get out of jail free card. That's an old Monopoly reference for those of you old enough to remember the game of Monopoly. That's just the way it goes. You won't make this mistake but one time, but it may be a critical time. So please remember that's part of due process. That's the practical side of it. All right, moving on. I can close that. Okay, I don't have to do that one. Okay, code of conduct. We've already done the manual. Incident reporting, I've shown you that. Oh, code of conduct. I want to show code of conduct. Oh, no, not that one. Let me see. Not that one. Here we go. All right. This is from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Code of Conduct. You will have one just like it in your district, in your code of conduct. It has procedures for short-term suspensions. Now, these same procedures are in place for any incident. That's further back in the, but I skipped to this one right here. A student accused of misconduct must be told by why the suspension is being, why, what they're there for. They have to be given the opportunity for an informal hearing. Now, this is not just for suspensions. This is any incident that they've been accused of, whether it leads to suspension or not. They have to be told why they're there. They have to be given the opportunity, to present their side of the case and identify any witnesses. The principal has to, weigh the evidence against them, get written witness statements from any witnesses, and then has to make a determination if they're guilty of the misconduct or not. It says right here, initial notice of imposed suspension may be communicated orally to the parent. Written notification must follow. That's what I'm talking about. The law is very clear. Must report each suspension in writing to the parents and the learning community. Okay, it goes on to say what has to happen here. And then you've got long-term suspensions. It gets in terms of, you need to learn your district's policies for due. This is what I'm talking about, the substance of due process. This district has a lot of due process things besides just the initial stuff, and it's based on notice of long-term suspension. They have a discipline team meeting, which is an intervention prior to a formal due process hearing by a hearing officer. They can be reassigned. Right to a due process hearing. The due process hearing itself, the parent comes in and has the right to be, and the student has the right to be represented by an attorney. The school district will be represented by an attorney. You'll have a hearing officer, and that person has to write it up and make a written determination. And then there's an appeal process that goes to the deputy superintendent or the superintendent, and then that they appeal that, they get a board hearing. And so all these procedures in the back of your rights and responsibilities or code of conduct, which is included in your rights and responsibilities handbook, this is a whole nother set of due process that you've got to learn for students who commit serious infractions that might lead to suspension or exclusion. Long-term disciplinary school, alternative school. There's a whole nother set of due process. Point of entry, point of exit, expungements, alternative discipline programs. All of these have a whole nother set of rules. But this is all part of due process. There's a whole nother set of rules for exceptional children. We've already looked at that parent handbook. You need to read that. There's a whole nother set of rules for disciplining exceptional children. These are all part of due process. It's not just simply get his side of the story and everything's good, or call them in and tell them what their punishment is. There's a lot more to due process than that. There's privacy. There's kids coming out of juvenile court system. There's kids that have committed acts of crime and violence that are looking at long-term suspension or 365-day suspension or reassignments to alternative programs. They all have another set of due process protections in place. You better learn them all, because you never know what's going to come walking through the door today. You can't say, well, wait a minute, I'm not up on that one yet. Can you bring that kid back Monday? I'll read up on that stuff over the weekend. No, you can't do that. You need to know now. So one of the things that you're going to need to do is find this handbook from your district and read all the different protections, the procedures. Again, substantive and procedural. Substantive is what is the substance of your district's policies on due process for different classification of students. Now, the reason I had you go in is to get an idea of how it works in your school, to go in and observe a due process kid being disciplined in your school. But more so, do they follow the stated procedure? Or do they just come in and say, we've talked to everybody, you're guilty, you're out the door? Or did they follow the actual procedure? So that's another one of these where this is another place which you have to go to for due process. This is your district's Rights and Responsibilities Handbook or Code of Conduct for your district. It has a whole nother set of due process protections for students. A lot of stuff in there to protect these people. All right. Here's another one of these. This one is a follow-up to last week. Assistant principal accused of not reporting student sexual abuse claims, careers report. You understand that not only do you get in trouble not reporting, you can also be held accountable, liable, a tort claim against you, and it can become in civil court, but it can also become criminal. And so here's an assistant principal pressured a 14-year-old girl to recant her claims of sexual relationship with a teacher, was in court facing a criminal charge. Let me say that again. I'm just a fount of good news tonight. I've already broken it to you that there is such a thing as tort liability, which is civil, where you could have to pay money if you do the wrong thing. This is the next level. This kind of concludes my talk on this area. If you do something like this can be construed as criminal misconduct. You can be charged criminally as well. The grand jury has now indicted this person. This is not an anomaly. This happens regularly where folks try to cover up or hide. Now, it goes back to that nobody can give you permission to break the law. I'm quite sure that nobody in her principal or in administration said, do this. But I know that that new administrators, especially new assistant principals, feel the pressure to get the numbers down. They feel the pressure to not have incidents like this because it makes the school look bad, and people associate that with them, and they think that this is going to hurt their career. Well, it can, but it's going to hurt it more if you get caught not reporting it, or in this case, pressuring people to perjure themselves. It won't go well for you. The least of your troubles is going to be your civil case. The criminal case is what you're going to get this person. So please remember that, nobody, if somebody's telling you to cover up or hide, you need to report that to their supervisor. Can't do that. And certainly you should never pressure somebody to recant their story or to keep quiet or not go to the police or something. That's against the law. There was a report, what's tonight? Wednesday night, Tuesday night, out of Charlotte about K2 out of school suspensions. And they have dramatically reduced them because the superintendent issued an edict that you would stop doing that. Well, and so they've, I think a couple of folks there, him included, probably dislocated their shoulder trying to pat themselves on the back about what a great job they've done. That doesn't change anything in the school, though. The incidents are still occurring. They're just not suspending K2 kids because it looks bad. The whole notion here is to, as we talked about last week and the week before, antecedent behaviors, do things to prevent the behaviors from happening in the first place. And that's always going to be my sermon to you is if you will do the work up front, hopefully you won't have so many of these bad behaviors on the backside. Train and work with your staff on sexual harassment, sexual misbehavior, sexual misconduct. Do all your training with them up front. Hold kids accountable for their lower level behaviors, their antecedent behaviors. Don't let them go unnoticed. Don't let kids act any way they want to act and then be surprised when bad things happen later on. Be proactive. I saw a T-shirt, and I've told you this one before too, that says, don't complain about the results that you didn't get from the work that you didn't do. You need to do the work up front. You need to be working with your faculty. You need to be working with kids on their behaviors, reporting these things. If you do the work up front, you won't have to be trying to hide and cover up, not report, pressure people not to tell the truth on the backside. That's my sermon to you. I was disappointed to see that report last night, and the superintendent said we told them not to suspend these kids. What the superintendent should have said is we need to be doing something to stop some of these behaviors. I'm sure that there are K2 teachers now in Charlotte Mecklenburg that are pulling their hair out. They look like me now because there was no impetus to stop the behaviors. It was just don't suspend them from school. That's not really a good way to approach that. It will get your numbers down, just like the assistant principal at the high school I told you about. She just didn't put them in. She said, well, they told me to get the numbers down. What they meant was is supervise better, put some programs in place, have your staff out on on duty, make sure that that you've got people assigned to after school activities and stop some of these behaviors. They didn't tell you just not to report them. But she said, well, that's what they said, just get the number down. Well, you'll have to do that for some other district. We can't live with that because these things happen. So what's going on in Charlotte Mecklenburg is not illegal. They're reporting what the kids are doing. They're just not suspending them from doing that. Now, they have the right to do that, but that doesn't make things better. That won't stop the behaviors. We'll have alternatives to suspension. Well, that's wonderful. But how about let's have programs in place to stop the behaviors to begin with. We won't have so many disgruntled teachers. In preparation for this class tonight, I watched a young man he's a teacher in Houston, Texas, and he's doing a series of 1-minute videos about all the complaints that teachers have. And, I've heard the same thing my whole career for 40 years. And one of the things that, that's his pet peeve is he asked the administration for help with discipline. The kid beats him back to the classroom, smiling and grinning, because they have an initiative not to suspend kids. And that is a frustration for classroom teachers. So my point in all this is you need to put procedures in place and be proactive in trying to prevent these hate behaviors. But once they occur, you need to follow everything to the letter of the law. And there's more law than just how to bring a kid in and do a little disciplinary session with them. There's laws for kids with exceptional children. There's laws for kids that are involved in the court system. There's laws for kids who commit acts of crime and violence. They have a separate set of due process procedures and laws in place to protect them. You need to find out what they are for your district. Please remember that it says clearly, the law says clearly, you must give them written notice of the parent, written notice of suspension. And it has to be the official notice. It can't be something you just wrote down on a piece of paper. Even though you told them in person, if you don't have the official paperwork, it will not stand up in court. I can tell you that. I've been too many times, more times than I wanted to. As a central office person, I was always the one that had to go and take the whipping. Walk over from the Ed Center over to the court system, walk through the park there, and, knowing that I was going to get beat severely once I got there. But it was convenient. I didn't even have to drive to the court to get my whipping. At least I could walk. You don't want to be that person that causes somebody like me to get that whipping, because folks in the central office have a simple rule: we pay back double what we get. And so it's not good to poke the bear, to make the person in the central office have to go across the street to the courthouse and get a whipping over you. One time is more than enough. Twice, and we won't have to worry about you again. So these are the kinds of things you need to remember. Follow all the due process. Be proactive in discipline. Make sure that kids get due process in your building, but be proactive. Address the little things before they become big things. Work with your staff to understand all the laws and rules. Tell them, keep your hands off the kids. That'd be the first thing that I'd tell a staff. If I was back in the school today, first thing we'd have, I'd call a faculty meeting and I'd tell them face to face, keep your hands off the kids. Don't touch them in any way, shape, or form. I don't care if it's, the most innocent thing in the world. Don't touch the kids. We can't take the risk anymore. That'd be the first thing I'd tell them. And then we'd work through all the definitions of all the sexual misbehaviors and all those kinds of things. Train your staff. Make them aware. Let them know what the law is. Work with your students. Make sure that they understand the expectations of behavior. Don't be an idiot that thinks if you put a uniform on a kid, that'll change his behavior. No, it won't. They'll just be kids behaving badly, dressed similarly. Understand that uniforms can be part of a process or a program, but the uniform itself won't change the kid's behavior. Don't be that dumb. So if you do these things, hopefully you can survive the first year or 2 or 3 of your assistant principalship and get to be principal and let somebody else carry this big burden around with them. That's the notion here, is that we got to get you through the initial years of your assistant principalship to get to be principal. And there's a lot of landmines. This is the biggest one other than the legal stuff. And then we'll talk more this semester about the money stuff that'll get you in trouble. But this due process, all this, these, this is hot topics now. Sexual harassment, all these kinds of things. This will end you before you get started. I don't mean I'm not henny penny running around the sky's falling. This is real. I can pull up dozens of screens like this one I'm showing you right now, dozens from the last month. Of course, I have a news feed that sends them all to me, that calls them out of the news and sends them all to me. But I get 2 or 3 of these a day, where people have not followed the procedures and not done the right things. And hopefully, as a result of this class, you probably won't learn a lot from me, but at least you'll make you curious. You'll go read and find out. So go find your code of conduct from your district. Go back and look at your reporting manual. Make sure that you know all the different types of due process according to protected groups of students. Find out about kids involved in the court system. Know all of those due process rights, and you'll sleep better at night. And you'll have a lot better chance of surviving it. All right. Did we have any more questions? We had 19 with us tonight. That was good. All right. Questions anybody has for me? Last thing, quickly, as I said, I'm going to look at this one. Please remember, this is OMA Task 3. Here is your prompt. Assessment of scheduling procedures. Not just the schedule itself, but the procedures that put it together. Be sure you got that. Alignment with school improvement team findings, legal requirements, all that. I had you put all that together in task. This one should be fairly easy because I made you collect everything in task 1, so you would have it at hand when this one came along. And then candidates develop a new schedule or draft of the current one. It can be the mini schedule, like from the building you're in or the department or something like that, and have a rationale for the changes that you'd like to make. And then, of course, moving from that, you're going to write your competencies again, like you do at the end of all of these evidence artifacts, except for the 5th one. You're going to write your competencies. The same 12 that you wrote for the APSEL, you'll write for the OMA. Let me say that again. Hopefully that'll head off a question or two. The 12 that you're going to write for the OMA are the same 12 that you wrote for the APSEL. And then you'll write 9 for the skip when we do it later this semester. That's the same 9 you did for the APTEL. It's the same process. 12, then 9. Everybody knows how to use their competency folio to upload their proofs of competency. Let's see. Let me see. Do you folks have a competency analysis? I don't think you do. Y'all don't have a competency analysis this semester, do you? Let's see. Y'all are Fall 17 add-on. Let's see. Fall 17 3-semester add-on. No competency analysis this semester, so you only have to write them in task 4 of the OMA and task 4 of the skip. You don't then have to copy and paste them into task stream into your DRF. You do have to do all 21 competency folios, proofs or artifacts this semester. You do 12 for the OMA, 9 for the skip. Remember, I don't need War and Peace. It's just a thing, an icon, an artifact that's produced as a result of your work. It's not a written explanation. It needs to be a thing that was produced as a result of the work that you did. So you will need to do your competency folio. You do have SOE dispositions this semester. You can go in and do those at any time and evaluate yourself. You don't have to write anything for those. So make sure you do your SOE dispositions. You don't have to do competency analysis this semester. You just write them in task 4 of the OMA and task 4 of the skip. And you have to do 21 competency proofs or artifacts this semester. 12, the 12 you did for the APSEL, you do for the OMA. The 9 you did for the APTEL, you do for the skip. All right. Any questions on any of these things? Yep, I got 4. Ooh. You go to questions right fast. Ooh. I've noticed that some assistant principals use the pink carbon copy of the referral form as a notice of suspension. Is that illegal? Yes, it is. It is not legal. That is not an official suspension form. It has to come out of Power School, the official one. Just out of curiosity, can you have someone go home the same day and not count it as a suspension? No, there is no such thing. We used to call that therapeutic suspension or ABC, absence before conference. Both of those are illegal. If they go home, it's a suspension. Where the records are the MTR meetings, that's manifestation termination meetings. Where are those kept? The EC teacher keeps those on file, or your EC department chair, excuse me. Or if you in a district that has a compliance technician, they normally have a space on your campus where they keep them in their file. So let me be clear on that. The manifestation is kept, a copy is kept by your EC chair and or your compliance technician if you have one in your district that comes to your campus and makes sure all paperwork's in compliance. There's also a copy kept in alternative education in their department. They have to keep a copy as well because that's the copy that goes in when the kid has a due process hearing. I just looked in. I noticed my task 2 posted in discussion board, but did not in assignment box. I'm not sure how this happened. Can I still? Yeah, there's no late in this class. You just put it in there. You know, you're on your honor to keep up with your work. I tell you what's due every time. I don't do the notifications. Poor old Dr. Stedman about kills himself sending weekly notifications. He's a lot better fellow than I am. I just post it and come online every week and work with you, but you're on your honor. I'm trying to transition you from, change your lens from that of a teacher or somebody on the other side of the desk to the administrative side. I don't have time to keep up with you. So there is no late. Whenever you can get it in there, that's fine with me. Are they kept in power? No, the MTR stuff is not kept in Power School. That would be a violation of the kids' rights. None of that stuff goes in Power School. It's all kept separately in a file that's locked. EC case managers, that would be a compliance technician. That's who usually has it, or the chair. I don't know what that one is. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Any other questions tonight? Look there, we got done in 45 minutes tonight, right on time. I ran over last week. I hate that. All right. If you have questions for me, let me know. You can put things in Dr. Stedman's, you can put them in our class discussion board. I read those every day. Put them in assignment Dropbox. I grade them, but I read every day in discussion board just like everybody else does. If you want Dr. Stedman's help, you have a clinical internship shell with his name on it. You can drop him in there and he'll get to you fairly quickly. So if you need help, just let us know. Let me go back and get this last question. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you, Ashley, for reminding me. All right, that was my wife on the phone a while ago. I got to go home. I'll talk to you soon. Everybody have a good holiday. Thank you.